bottles for?
I'm going into the tunnels. I'm gonna find those things. And I'm gonna burn every last fucking one of them.
Okay.
Okay, what?
Okay, let's do it. Let's go. There's the one thing I do know. This is how they want us. Angry. Hey, if we find them, there's a good chance we are not coming back. But if this is what you want to do, I will go with you side by side, and we will take out as many of those motherfuckers as we can.
What is up, everybody? Jeremy Eisenfire here, and welcome to the channel. Episode 2 of From is here, entitled When We Go, and I must say this episode was a massive gut punch from start to finish, and it certainly managed to meet the very high bar that the first episode set up. From seeing Kenny, Boyd, and the rest of the town's heartbreaking reaction to the horrible death of Tien Chen, to Fatima munching down on death and decay incarnate, to the massive reveal we get towards the end of the episode regarding Miranda and what Tabitha's fate might be, and of course the mind-bending phone call that Jim receives to end the episode off. But for me, one of the highlights of the episode was the incredible performance by Ricky He as Kenny. I feel like this was probably his best episode to date. The episode starts off with Jade entering the barn the following morning after the untimely demise of Tien Chen, likely expecting to find both Boyd and her dead, but of course is incredibly shocked to see that Boyd is still alive. And I must say, the stark contrast in terms of just how night and day different Episode 1 ended to how Episode 2 began was pretty interesting to see. I thought that it was a brilliant choice in terms of how they chose to showcase the death scene of Tien Chen, and how they didn't lean into the gore and shock value in order to carry the scene, but instead relied solely on the phenomenal acting performance of Harold Perrineau, and seeing the wide range of emotion that Boyd was showcasing in that scene. From anger to fear to sadness to guilt even, you could really see him going through it. And the fact that they didn't show exactly what the monsters were doing to her made the scene that much better in my opinion, as it was left up to us as the audience to fill in those blanks for ourselves. And sometimes it is in the imagining of what could potentially be happening that makes it scarier than actually seeing what is happening. To go from a scene that shied away from the gore in Episode 1 to them putting pedal to the metal and slamming directly into the gore in Episode 2 and not shying away in the slightest was a very interesting choice. Which of course was one of the questions that some of us had coming into Episode 2. Would they choose to show what exactly happened to Tien Chen? Would we actually see the state of her body? Or would they just showcase her wrapped up in the cloth that we see in the trailer? And boy, did we get that answer right in the beginning, as we see poor Tien Chen has been absolutely gutted by these monsters, which Jade was horrified to see. But another aspect of the scene that I really did enjoy was the state that we find Boyd in when Jade first enters the barn, and how it appears that he has been trying to memorize the final words of Tien Chen all night in Cantonese, which of course we get a phenomenal payoff to later on in the episode. But next we get our second gut punch, as Boyd is finally released from his handcuffs and we see him crawling over to Tien Chen's body, and we see just the devastation on his face, knowing that he is most likely responsible for what happened to her. And just from the tone of the first few minutes, you could really tell this was going to be a heavy episode, and it certainly proved to be. But next, we get one of the few uplifting scenes in the episode where Jim and Kenny stumble upon a brand new food source, which seems to be enough to feed the entire town, which could not have come at a better time. And while all of this is going on, we see back in town everyone is learning about and reacting to the death of Tien Chen, as Boyd and Jade bring her body to the church. At which point, Jade learns that they forced Boyd to watch Tien Chen's death, as he was wondering why Boyd was alive and she wasn't. And then the episode starts to lean into the gore a little bit more. As we see Boyd depart from the church and walk up the road, we are seeing flashbacks to everything that he saw that the monsters did to Tien Chen. And it was certainly a very graphic and gruesome way to torture and kill somebody. And one thing I am wondering about going forward is what is going to happen to Boyd after being clawed by one of the monsters. And up until this point, we have yet to see anyone ever get slashed by a monster and live to talk about it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Boyd's shoulder. Is it just a regular wound? Or could we see some kind of infection or something worse start to set in? But as we continue to see the rest of the town find out about Tien Chen, Kenny and Jim eventually return as the triumphant heroes who have solved the food shortage crisis, only to have Kenny's world absolutely rocked a second later when he finds out about the death of his mother. And this scene was incredibly heartbreaking to see Kenny, just the way he was processing this information, how he almost didn't even want to accept it at first, as he is still calling out for his mother in Cantonese in front of her house, saying, "Mom, I'm home, where are you?" Which eventually leads to he and Christy heading to the diner for Kenny to grieve. And while all of that is going down in the town, we are starting to see that Fatima is continuing to get worse because of this pregnancy, as she is now even starting to lose teeth, prompting her and Ellis to head to the medical clinic. And while Christy is unavailable, Marielle is present, and we do learn a little bit more about Marielle's background as well, as we find out that she is a pediatric nurse, which would make her very familiar with pregnancies. And she ultimately determines that Fatima is extremely malnourished and suffering from a very severe case of morning sickness, and is urging her to get some food inside of her. But as we've learned earlier, Fatima is having a tough time keeping any kind of food down. That is, of course, until they return to Colony House and Fatima realizes that she is starting to crave rotten food. Unfortunately, the crops all around Colony House seem to go rotten, as Donna was stating that it seems like the ground had been poisoned against them, and now I'm starting to think that there is a very specific reason why the ground in the surrounding area was quote-unquote poisoned. I get the feeling this rotten food was specifically put here for Fatima's baby, as a source of nourishment, as we see she cannot keep any kind of normal food down, as if maybe the baby is rejecting it. Which of course begs the question, just what exactly could Fatima potentially be giving birth to? Which makes you wonder what kind of dark plan something or someone has for them both. But back at the town, we see that Kenny is getting ready to go on the offensive, as he loads up with as much alcohol as he can carry and plans to head to the caves and take out as many monsters as possible, where Boyd actually agrees to go with him. And this was definitely my favorite scene of the episode, as we got a phenomenal payoff between Boyd and Kenny at the cave entrance, where we finally learn exactly what Tien Chen's final words were that Boyd was uttering upon Jade entering the barn. And I really enjoyed how Boyd was ready and willing to stand side by side with Kenny to enter this cave and potentially take out as many as they possibly could before they fell, as he then reveals to Kenny that Tien Chen was not alone and afraid when she died, which was something Kenny was worried about.
They made me watch. Hey, she was strong, Kenny. She was strong. Listen to me. She was brave. She looked at me and she did not take her eyes off me. Before she died, she said, "Oho chuguko yiga takochi gela." No, I don't even know if I'm saying this right.
Take care of him. That's what it means. Take care of him. He'll be alone now.
Come here, man. Come here. It's okay. I got you, bro.
So here we see that in Tien Chen's final moment, her last wish with her dying breath was for Boyd to take care of Kenny, and you best believe he is definitely going to honor that request. And overall, it was just a really incredible payoff to the scene that started the episode off on. But last, and certainly not least, we get a pretty interesting storyline for Tabitha in episode 2 as well, as it starts off with Henry seemingly not believing her story about how she came across Victor's lunchbox at first, until, that is, Tabitha mentions something about the children being locked in the tower, which Henry instantly recognizes as something Miranda used to say as well, Victor's mother. As first, we see Henry shows Tabitha Victor's childhood room, and it looks like Victor has long been a fan of peaches, as we see peaches all over his bedroom wallpaper. And one prediction that we made in our episode 1 breakdown that I was very pleased to see that did come true was how Henry was not just your average, everyday, abusive and alcoholic father who neglected his kids, but rather just your average, everyday father who was heartbroken after losing a family that he loved under unknown circumstances. And I'm really glad that From managed to stay away from that very common and overused trope of the alcoholic abusive father. As next, we see Henry takes Tabitha down into the basement where we get a massive reveal, which shows that Miranda, Victor and Eloise's mother, was seemingly having visions and hearing voices of Fromville long before she was ever even stuck in there while she was back in the real world, and how she used to paint everything she saw. And here we see just a gold mine of Easter eggs from the show, including a drawing of the Ankui children, bottle trees, faraway trees, the diner, lighthouse, the Civil War soldier, the boy in white, and much, much more. I will be doing a much more in-depth breakdown of every single painting in this basement and what most of them mean, so be on the lookout for that later this week. But one painting that stood out above the rest was this mysterious man in yellow, which for some reason instantly reminded me of The King in Yellow, a famous Lovecraftian-style story by Robert Chambers, in which a man seeks refuge inside a church after reading a collection of stories that make up The King in Yellow, only for him to end up meeting his ultimate fate as the King in Yellow drags him to the land of Carcosa, stating it is a shameful thing to fall into the hands of a living god. Which isn't too dissimilar for what we're seeing in Fromville, as people are being dragged from the real world into this other nightmarish world, seemingly by some unknown force or deity. But when you take a closer look at The King in Yellow and these short stories that it makes up, you start to realize that there are some interesting similarities between the stories and Fromville, including the overall outcome of driving people to madness upon reading The King in Yellow, very similar to how something seems to be trying to drive people mad here in the town as well. And even down to the similarities between Fromville and Carcosa, the ancient, mysterious, and cursed land that the man is dragged off to by the King in Yellow, which does sound a little bit similar to the potentially ancient, mysterious, or cursed land that Fromville is set upon.
There's darkness in the forest. Nightmares again, even if you can't imagine. My blood is your blood now.
Even down to the mysterious Lake Halai that Carcosa sits upon, very similar to the potential Lake of Tears that might be in From. Now, obviously, I'm not expecting to see the King in Yellow in Fromville anytime soon, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be too surprised if they took some small measure of inspiration from this story and applied it into their own. But at the end of the day, we are left to wonder, who exactly is this man in the yellow suit? Is he potentially the antithesis to the boy in white? Is this his enemy, the yin to his yang? Could the boy in white and this man in yellow be locked in some kind of eternal struggle for control of the town, that potentially the survivors and the monsters are simple, unwitting pawns on some cosmic chess game? Who knows, but I am really looking forward to learning a little bit more about this mysterious man in yellow, and when and if we will see him on the show. And another interesting thing we learned down in the basement is how Miranda seemed to think that she was somehow chosen by something to rescue these Ankui children, and that we learned that she was not the first person that was chosen either, as she was seeing previous versions that were also chosen before her, all of which seemed to fail to rescue the Ankui children, and now it seems like Henry thinks that Tabitha might be the next one that is chosen. But is it really Tabitha that is the chosen one? After all, up until this point, we have seen no indication that Tabitha has seen any past versions of previous people that might have been chosen. Yet there is one other character on the show that might be seeing past versions of what they're going through right now. And that, of course, is Jade. Could Jade ultimately be the real chosen one? After all, he was shown a very clear and vivid vision of these Ankui children as well, seemingly being part of some kind of ritual or sacrifice. And Jade has also been plagued with visions of people that have seemingly seen this symbol before him, previous versions of himself. Were these all previous versions of the Chosen One, like Christopher or even the Civil War soldier? Is Jade being shown this symbol and these children because he is ultimately meant to save them where every previous version has failed? Who knows, but at the end of the day, if it is not Tabitha that is the Chosen One, I get the feeling it could potentially be Jade. as he and Tabitha have been the only characters to see the Onkui children up until this point. But next, we see that Christy and Jade have finished preparing Tian Chen's body for the funeral, and we get that really awesome callback to When We Go, the conversation that Jade and Tian Chen had at the end of Season 1 when she was mourning her husband.
You know, I grew up in France with my grandma. She died when I was 12. I had to come back to the States. I was crying at the airport. And this nice lady bought me a soda. I told her what was wrong. She said to me, "They come with you when you go." I guess what I'm just trying to say is, don't be sad. I'll come with you when you go.
And now, 2 seasons later, we see it come full circle as Jade is promising Tian Chen that she will come with them when they go, followed by the really heartfelt scene of Kenny bidding farewell to his mother. But next, after the funeral concludes, we get a very interesting scene between Boyd and Ellis, where Boyd is seemingly fed up with always being on the defensive and never being able to combat these monsters, and it seems like he is finally ready to start going on offense, as he states to Ellis that he plans on trapping one of the monsters. And this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, and if Boyd will ever even manage to trap one of these monsters, or if it's even possible. As much as I would really love to see Boyd go all Jack Bauer on one of these monsters, it's going to be pretty hard to isolate one of them alone and trap it, as they are usually always traveling in packs of 2 or 3 or even 4. Many fans have been wondering ever since Season 1, since these talismans managed to keep the monsters out of a structure, is there any possible way they can be utilized to keep a monster inside of a structure? At this point, I suppose it's impossible to know for sure, as there's still so much about these talismans that we simply don't know. But definitely let me know what you think down below. Will Boyd manage to trap one of these monsters successfully, or will he potentially get himself or others hurt in the process? But lastly, the episode ends with a massive cliffhanger as Jim receives a very mysterious phone call of someone claiming to be his deceased son, Thomas, which of course was the son that Jim and Tabitha lost, which ultimately led to them almost getting a divorce. But what exactly was this voice? Was this really the deceased son of Jim and Tabitha trying to reach out to Jim? Or could this potentially be Fromville itself trying to enact some kind of mind manipulation on Jim? Or potentially may even be the same being that was on the other end of the radio at the end of Season 1. But either way, I cannot wait to see where Episode 3 and the rest of the season goes from here. Episode 1 and 2 have come right out of the gate swinging for the fences, and they have been hitting home run after home run, and I cannot wait to see what else they have in store for us. But definitely leave your thoughts and comments down below. What was your favorite moments from Episode 2? And do you really think that was Thomas on the phone with Jim? And don't forget to hit the like on your way out and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications to stay up to date on all of our upcoming From content. And as always, keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and I will see you on the next one.
We can't keep doing this. We can't just keep sitting around waiting to see what... We need more information. Yeah, I'm gonna need your help with something tomorrow. Okay?
Yeah, all right, but with what?
We're gonna catch one of these fucking things.